So we're officially starting the building construction oversight committee meeting. We have all of our committee members, current committee members, in attendance, I believe, and also members of the school board. We have Commissioner Carey, Commissioner Fisher, and Commissioner Olwell in attendance. And I think Jordan just arrived. Hi, Jordan.
Hello.
So we're going to, sorry about that. We're going to review the reconciliation process. I just wanted to remind folks where we were a month ago. It was March 9th when we met at, I believe it was at Edmonds, a real live face-to-face meeting. And we went through the current estimate, and at that time we were still not complete with the reconciliation with the third-party estimator. And so one of the purposes of this meeting is to bring you up to date on how that reconciliation process went and what the results of that are. And also another part of that meeting was we were charged with trying to find a way, a plan for funding if there were items in the scope that put us over budget, that are really hot ticket items that everybody wants, then we were charged with finding a path forward. And we have a part of this presentation tonight will be Nathan Lavery going over that. You received his memo earlier, late last week, I believe, on Thursday or Friday, laying out the plan for closing that gap without taking on additional debt. Any questions about the agenda?
No, Tom, I just want to confirm, and I don't want to make assumptions, but Nathaniel, are you taking the notes for the meeting minutes?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And we're also recording it as well, so it's suspenders and a belt tonight. This is this current schematic design that we're working off of. This shows this addition. Can everybody see the cursor?
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
This is a connector between A building and B building. This would be the new auxiliary gym if we could afford it. This area here is the Galleria. So again, this design represents the schematic design that was most recently estimated. It doesn't represent the design with some of the deducts, some of the cuts that we're proposing. And we can hop back to this schematic for reference when we need to. So we've got, we wanted to go over this. This is this column represents Whiting-Turner's estimate. I wanted to remind people too that this is broken out into 3 different parts. So we have sorry about that, gotta turn my ringer off. We have the cost of work, we have general conditions, and we have owner costs. So the cost of work is really the actual cost of construction to actually build what's in the plan. Whiting-Turner's estimate for this schematic design came in at $59,000 for the cost of work. The third-party estimator looked at the same.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
59 million.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I may be doing that all night. It's been a long day. $59,269,000 for the current scope of work. The the third-party estimator was given the same documents to review, and their estimate came in at $60,786,000. Then the two parties got together. We actually the whole team, including Marty and Claire and me and Whiting Turner and Black River Design and folks from Vermeulen's, which is the company that did the third-party estimate. And we went through line by line and talked about make sure that everyone was clear on what the scope was. Make sure that if there are any gaps in understanding of what the scope of the work was. We cleared, I would say, probably 70 or 75% of those questions in a 2 or 3 hour meeting. And then Whiting Turner and Vermeulen's got together to clear the final items, to go through line by line and reconcile the final items. And what it came down to is in the lower right corner, the reconciliation figure is within 1.8%. We were shooting for a margin of 3 to 5% between the two estimates. So we're pretty pleased with 1.8% delta on the reconciled estimate for the cost of work. Then we get into the proposed cost savings. Actually, these are a little bit out of order, so I'm gonna come back to the proposed cost savings. The next item is really the general conditions. So bonds and construction contingency and insurance and fees and that sort of thing, the contractors' fees, and then escalation contingencies and design and owner contingencies as well. So here again, we've got Whiting Turner's original general conditions were at about $12,867,000. Vermeulen's came in and said, no, we think general conditions for what we're seeing should be about $16,321,000. And it was reconciled at $14,315,000. So that's a difference of 14%, which is a bit of a gap, but we're not really worried about that because general conditions are always figured out differently by different people. Every company has a different way to skin the cat when it comes to general conditions. And Whiting Turner has been living with this project longer than the third-party estimator. And Whiting Turner is also the company that has to perform and live with these numbers. So we're pretty comfortable with the reconciled number here. The next item is on owner costs. Those really haven't changed much over the course of the estimating process. I mean, from the start, from a year and a half ago, the owner has had a long list of owner cost items, including the consultant fees, the fees for us, fees for the architect, the engineers, permits, kitchen equipment. It's a long list, and I'm not giving furniture and other equipment, that sort of thing. So this is basically reconciled at less than 1%. It rounded out to 0%. So owner costs are in at about $9,042,000, and that's if we are able to keep the furniture budget at $360,000 and are able to actually, yeah, that's the only thing in there that we really dropped was the furniture budget was at 300,000. At one point in the process, it went up to 720,000, and then we dropped it back to 360. So right now, the 360 is 20% higher than the original furniture budget. So that brings our total to 73,844,000. And to get to that number, I really have to go back up a couple slides to the cost saving options. And these are things that we discussed at length on March 9th. So, but I wanted to review them, go through them with you again, just to remind you. The first item is CHIP certification. For now, we're gonna keep that in. We have a line item for CHIP certification that covers the cost of the CHIPS consultant. It doesn't necessarily include the cost of achieving the CHIPS points. That really won't be fleshed out until we get into design development. So for now, we want to keep the CHIPS certification in there, at least in terms of getting guidance from our consultants, but we're not necessarily promising that we'll achieve the actual certification, but we want to keep the consultant in the process in order to come as close to meeting those requirements as we can. In other words, we're not giving up on CHIPS yet. The canopy, we are required to have some more bike parking, and it was originally going to be covered bike parking. That canopy is about $136,000 and can be added later when more funds are available at a later date. That seemed to be a pretty easy one to leave out for now. The student parking lot is something that could possibly be funded out of some capital bond, a different capital bond that was earmarked for BHS work. And that's almost, in round figures, about $400,000. The existing gym floor replacement, we've got some, I think, some pretty solid numbers. If I'm not mistaken, Marty, that the gym floor replacement is about $175,526, and that could be deferred. It's not quite at the very end of its useful life, and it could you probably squeeze a few more years out of it. The bleachers are absolutely have to be done. They're a safety issue, and but those could be funded out of the capital bond money from the previous bond that was earmarked for BHS. There was a lot of discussion last month about the level of finishes in the project, and there are some cost savings to be found if we go to gypsum wallboard instead of cement. CMU is cement or concrete masonry units. That's what that stands for. In other words, block walls versus sheetrock walls. GWB stands for gypsum wallboard. It was at the last meeting, it was decided that was probably not desirable. Let's try to do this project with the more durable finishes and get 50 years out of this renovation. The same goes for the quartz tile. The quartz tile is in the base bid now. There could be a potential cost savings to go from quartz tile to a vinyl composition flooring, and that installed cost would reflect a savings of about $266,000. This does not take into account the operating cost of vinyl composition tile. That's a substantial cost in a lot of school systems because of summer. There's a lot of work that has to be done in the summer to maintain VCT flooring. Reducing the carpet scope was basically going from a fairly new product that's very durable, bomb-proof, easily cleanable, and going from that to a carpet tile. Still some advantages to carpet tile over broadloom carpet, but it's not nearly as durable as the product that we want to be spec'd in the building. So I think we heard from the public that the members of the public at the last meeting really seemed to support going with more durable finishes. I believe that the BCOC committee members felt the same way, and when we took this to the school board the next night, I believe there is some consensus there as well. So in reduced interior finishes, none of those cuts were taken. We want to keep the more durable finishes in the project. The next one is the Galleria, and this is to remind you is a combination. It's kind of a 1-2 punch. The Galleria is that grand entrance that would have required a lot of overbuilding, a lot of demolition, raising the ceiling in the main lobby. It would have been the real wow factor of the project. It did create some new program space, but a lot of that space was given over to circulation space. And as a way to cut costs, we can eliminate that Galleria concept, but still capture some of that program space by enlarging the connector that's going to be built between buildings B and D. That connector is going to be built anyway, and to add some classrooms to that would be very cost effective. So the net reduction reconciled out at just under $1 million to eliminate the Galleria and create program space elsewhere on the project more efficiently. The F building, reducing the building renovations in F building reconciled out at 5.4 million. We can get into more detail about that later. It doesn't mean that no work would be done in F building, but it would be limited to mainly to improving and bringing the ADA compliance up to date. The HVAC system, it's currently a fairly complex, pricey system, but it provides really good ventilation and air conditioning throughout the whole facility. Talking with Noel and members of the public and teachers and others who use the building, I think again that was a place where there was consensus that air conditioning was desirable moving forward, and we should try to keep that in the project. The auxiliary gym was something that we were proposing to keep in the design, so that you have that design available to the district, even putting it out to bid when the project does go out to bid, so we know what the cost of that is. And if the bids come in favorably and we can afford to do the gym, then we can build the gym. If the bids come in where we think they will and we can't afford the gym, then the gym can be bid as a deduct alternate or an add alternate, depending on how we want to structure it. But that's also a project that could stand alone with future fundraising or future borrowing. That and F building renovations can really stand on their own without interrupting the rest of the project. So what that means is it brings the cost of work to $50,486,000, and the total cost to $73,844. So there's that we're going to round that up and say it's $4 million gap between the bond funds available and the projected costs. So there's the tail of the tape there. So I hope everybody had a chance to read Nathan's memo. He put a lot of work into exploring a lot of different avenues for putting together a package to close this gap. This is it in a nutshell. But I think I'd like to give Nathan a chance to expand on it a little bit and or answer any questions that people have, because this is new information. The rest of the information I just covered is really a recap of what we did last month. This is new info.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So again, if folks have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. I think that you can see there's kind of a variety of different options that we explored in the memo. One that I'm hoping we can get some interest in pursuing with the city, obviously, is the first one. We don't kind of control that first idea ourselves as a school district. The Taft School lease money is an important one that ultimately the school board is going to want to make sure that they understand that is money that we earned from leasing the Taft School to the University of Vermont, and we have a balance of funds left from that lease. So again, it's one-time money. Once we've spent it on something, it's gone. In this case, the Taft program has a substantial amount of, or the on-top program has a substantial amount of space in the high school, and part of the program or the vision for using Taft School lease proceeds was to support the On Top and Horizons program. So it felt like a justifiable use of that money. It's clearly within the scope of what we kind of pledged to the voters we would do in that ballot item when it was on the item. We've discussed, I think, in some other settings briefly, the possible application of some of the capital plan money that is in the district's long-term capital plan that primarily focuses on other school buildings. But as Marty's discussed in the past, there was an allocation set aside for the high school, and we have not exhausted that allocation. So there's an opportunity to simply use money from that capital plan. So unlike the other items on this list, that third item, use of capital plan proceeds, that is borrowed money, but it's not borrowed as part of the BHS project. It's something that we have separate approval to do. And then the one-time owner funding cost, this is my kind of catch-all way of summarizing a variety of other items. I put an example that I think is useful in the memo to give people a sense of what we're talking about here. And that example was with food service, where we actually have an amount of money in food service that we could reasonably, and it's common practice in these projects to actually have food service pay for some of the equipment and kitchen investments and so forth. It can't be used for construction of the project, so this is not about building the physical space. This is about reducing the owner's costs associated with equipping the new kitchen spaces. That is a permissible use of money. So that's one example, and there are others in there that we could go into as well if necessary. But that's the summary, and as Tom said, these are kind of ballpark numbers here to get us there. But I'm confident that within the variety of options we put forward, we can get to the $4 million that we are targeting.
And I wanted to briefly touch and go back to the Taft School line item there to put On Top in perspective. I'm scrolling through another report right now, looking for their current square footage. I don't have the current square footage that they're occupying at the high school, but I know that the proposed square footage on the third floor of the new connector addition is just under 7,000 square feet. We also know that the the cost of new construction on this project in round figures is approximately $377 a square foot. So that puts the cost of the in really broad strokes, that puts the cost of the on top portion of this program at about $2.6 million. So going through the project highlights, this is the part where we say what we're really going to get. I mean, we've all been through the painful cuts, but we have to keep in mind what we're going to get to keep and what the difference that this is going to make for this facility. Obviously, the accessibility and ADA compliance, those connectors are going away, the ones that are too steep. We'll have new connectors. We have a lot of bathroom upgrades, better, more elevators, better circulation, more maker space. We have consolidation of classroom instruction, so that for the most part, the way it's conceived now is departments will be to kind of co-located. For example, science D building is going to be given over to the science department. That's where all the labs and classrooms will be for science. New windows, new roofs, added insulation. There'll be improved energy efficiency. There will be definitely a new HVAC system, no matter where we land on that, as far as whether or not to do the air conditioning or not. The HVAC system will be improved over what it is now by a very large margin. Definitely improved safety. There'll be fewer entrances and exits, or fewer entry points to the building that are unsecured, and better lines of sight for security. And of course, better fire protection. There was some talk about what we could possibly accomplish this summer. All bets are off with this pandemic. It's nobody really knows when the sanctions or when the restrictions are going to be lifted, or how they'll be lifted, or in how broadly they'll be lifted, and all that will have a bearing on what we can get done this summer. So all these things on the left side of the screen that are feasible for the summer work. That's feasible, meaning that it can work into the logistical plan of the whole project without creating more problems down the road. So we will need to create a new electrical room for the project, and that'll most likely be a relatively small appendage attached to the side of the building, and that could possibly be done this summer. It'd be nice to get that in place so that all the new work can start being run. All the electrical runs can be taken to that building as the project moves. The bleachers could conceivably be done this summer. If we decide to do the gym floor, that could be done this summer. I should say that it may be a real squeeze to get both of those done in one summer, unless the stay-at-home and school closings extends into the fall, because the gym floor will take some time, and the bleachers can't go in until after the gym floor is in. Student parking lot, that should be pretty easy to get spec'd out and bid out. Some of the F building upgrades, some of the asbestos abatement, possibly some of the structural upgrades, although I don't hold out a lot of hope for that, because that is going to require a bit of engineering and time. And some of the utility locating and relocating of some of the utilities, that's a possibility. Again, all of this hinges on when we're going to be allowed to actually construct. Next steps in this process is to get your feedback and make it official and part of the record, and bring this to the district board next Tuesday. It'll be a very similar presentation. There might be a few more pieces of information that we'll include, but the slide deck will be essentially the same as this one. And then we're also still hoping to get on the Board of Finance agenda for the April 27th date, which is theoretically their next available meeting. The revised timeline, this is real broad strokes. BRD has spent a lot of time in the last week or so working on a detailed project schedule, and these are just highlights from that schedule. And the biggest challenge here is down at this second to last item, as the construction start being July of next year. What we were really hoping to do was be able to complete construction documents by the 1st of 2021 and get it out to bid and have work start in spring of 2021. And there's a real big question about whether or not we'll be able to get those construction documents completed in that time frame. BRD now is anticipating that design development will take 5 months from the time we get the go-ahead, which gets us to October 1st. If we get the go-ahead on May 1st, then we won't be able to begin construction documents until October. So we're going to be talking with BRD and the contractor a lot over the next few weeks to figure out how we can compress the schedule. But there's so many things that are up in the air in regard to the stay-at-home restrictions. A lot of the design work can happen remotely. You know, these teams can be working from home and doing a lot of the design, but that's no substitute for being on site and being able to crawl through the building and take measurements and do calculations and take photographs and have people meet there and put their heads together. So that's a real unknown. The other unknown is the permitting phase. I haven't talked with anybody in the city yet to find out how they're adjusting their permitting processes and what kind of effect that'll have on the schedule. But that is likely to be a factor. So, it's time for questions, comments, discussion. And remember to unmute yourselves.
So I think what we'll do is BCOC members, if Tom, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll give way to we'll start with any BCOC members that would like to speak. You can raise your hand and be recognized by Tom. And you know, again, if their questions need to be based on the slide deck, obviously, Tom, you'll go to that page and we'll answer those questions or clarifying questions. So we'll start first with any BCOC members that have questions, and then we can move into school board members.
David, hang on,
Well, Let,
Oh,
let- let
yeah,
me-
we can hear you.
let me get things started here.
Thanks.
So as I understand it, so we're not at 70 at this point. We're at 70, almost 74. But we have this list of things that might be able to close that gap. I mean, to what degree do we think those are really going to close the gap? And if we can't close the gap or all of it, then we're going to really, there was a slide at the end in what you had sent out about the path to 70 million.
Mhm.
Then I was saying if we can't get those 4 items to close the gap, then we go to these other 4 items and start cutting those as the priority cuts. Is that what it comes down to?
Yes. Even with this list, there are more potential things on the list, but there are no home runs. There are things in the $200,000 or $300,000 range that you need a lot of those to save $4 million. So
Right.
the main home run in further cost cutting would be eliminating air conditioning from the project. Somewhere around, in again, real broad strokes, around $2 million in savings.
Yeah, and could I just jump in here, Tom?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure people understand with, of course, the exception of the permitting, the zoning permit fees, which we don't control, and those are estimated costs. As long as there's support ultimately at the school board level and so forth for the other 3 items on that list, that is essentially money that we have in hand right now. We can do it. So there's no doubt in my mind that those options will allow us to move forward with the project without having to make any more reductions at this time. So I just want to make sure those aren't like speculative amounts. Those are amounts that I've dug into and said, what do we have here that we can actually work with? That's not anticipation of money or revenues, but is actually money that we either have the cash already, or in the case of the capital plan, we have the authority to borrow it already.
But someone has to agree to divert those 3 items. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the school board needs to say, yeah, we're willing to do this and to use these funds, such as the TAP money, which again it's kind of what it's there for. But in fairness, someone else might say, I want to wait and not use that money, or I have something else that I want to do with it. I mean, it's a decision for ultimately for the board. They, with respect to how that money is used, but it'll get us there.
And what's the read of the board in terms of those 3 items, and what's the read of the city at this point in terms of the other 400,000?
So that's a great question. The read of the board is, we have board members on, this is their time to, they'll be able to digest this. They've only had probably 4 days to look at these options, these revenue options. The question I imagine that will come up is, well, if we stay at 70 million and we use this 4 million to bring the debt down, what does that look like? And for us, this project over the course of the entire year, we feel that we have made significant cuts based on starting out with a bond number that was ambitious based on the site and the goal of efficiency for this campus. So when we take out the ancillary gym and we eliminate F building BTC, that speaks volumes to that $70 million bond that we are unable to meet those items, those big items in this project. So as we come here today and we'll present to the school board, we have spent this entire year and mainly the last 7 months getting this project to meet the needs and the expectations of the taxpayers at 70 million with this additional, 3.8 rounded out to 74. And without, it would be irresponsible for us as a team and group that has been working together to potentially present anything else short of that, based on the hard work and the cost involved already to deliver this high school and the needs that it needs to meet. And again, we go back to the overarching goal of this entire bond and renovation is ADA accessibility, efficiency, and safety. And so those three criteria, if we were to look at any additional cuts, which we have done, this would be, our umpteenth review of what we could cut out. We would be talking about roof replacements and things of that nature, that really, from the professionals in the room that have been working on this is our number. This is where we stand. This is why we have asked Nate over the last month and a half to, originally we went down the path in November, December of doing an additional campaign with our community member Kate Stein and some school board members and past school board members, Mark Barlow, Martine Gulick, people who had offered about a capital campaign. And when we looked at what Nate had researched and those funds available based on the criteria that we need to meet and approve the legality of using those funds, and coupled with our third-party estimate coming in so close, this 1.8%, that was an incredibly positive experience. That showed, for us, the confidence that we can come to the school board and the Board of Finance and this committee to say, these numbers, we have drilled it down and we are very satisfied with the investment in that third-party estimate and what this is. So I talked a lot here, but the question you ask is, what do we think the school board, will think about this? That will be up to us to open that dialogue. And I'm curious, what, again, this committee thinks, Peter and Jordan and Eric and yourself, David, as we look at this and what we're presented, yes, Nathan's document is new to you. And if we can cover those costs, it comes down to asking for your support, given what Nathan has presented, and then, be able to answer the questions you have that I sort of talked about today, which is, what if we don't use that funding and we still want to get this project down to 70 million and use that extra money to reduce those costs. But we are at a point now where Marty and Tom and Kate and our team of Whiting Turner and Black River Design, looks humbly for approval for these numbers as they stand.
Tom, I could speak to the city permits if now's a good time. Otherwise, I'll just wait if you want to have a separate discussion on that item.
Jordan, that would be great. Yeah, this is
Great.
a perfect time for that.
Excellent. So I, after receiving Nathan's memo, have been talking with my colleagues about the question of the city waiving any permit fees or the zoning permit fee. And I think what we need right now is a little bit more information from the school district. Was the $400,000 estimate, did that come from the city or did that come from the district?
We calculated that based on the costs that are listed on the zoning department's website.
Okay, just
So it's roughly $7.50 or $8 per thousand. something
Okay.
like that.
So, a more detailed delineation of how that number was estimated would be useful. The fees, I think, is the folks working on projects in this group know the fees are designed to cover the city costs relating to the application and project, including the city staff and overhead. So, I think at least some of the fees would probably need to be paid. That being said, we are looking into what we might be able to do under the statutory and legal guidelines and hope to have more information soon. It would help us to examine this further if the school district could put together a more detailed summary of how the 400,000 was come to, so we can see, okay, what parts might be more easy to look at versus other parts of that number.
Okay, I can get on that tomorrow. Is the zoning staff taking calls? Are they working remotely?
So, yeah, and this came up earlier, and so yes, the city staff are all working remotely right now. I can't speak to your earlier question, Tom, about about issuing new permits. I don't think we're issuing any new permits at this time, but in terms of technical questions and
Mhm.
follow-up, that's something that we definitely are able to do right now.
Well, that's good because I have a number of very specific questions in mind that I think will let us zero in on fairly close permit fee
Great.
numbers.
And have you've been talking to have you been talking to Scott Guston?
Yeah, last year. I mean,
Right.
uh,
Scott, I did share this information with Scott, so Scott has a little bit of background in what's going on, and he'll know what you're reaching out about because he's who I
Good.
work with to get
Good.
the information.
Okay. I'm so.
I have a question about the zoning permit fees. So
Yeah.
is approximately $400,000 of zoning anticipated zoning permit fees, are those are already in that project budget that you presented this morning, or not this morning, earlier this in this presentation?
Yes.
Right. So I mean, the point I just want to make clear is whether we have that number exactly right or wrong is almost immaterial in the sense that if we put $400,000 in there and the city came back and said we're waiving all the costs, whether those costs really should have been budgeted at 600,000 or 200,000 doesn't matter. It means that we zero out that line and
Sure, and
we're in business.
and I think I think it's unlikely that we'll be able to zero it out. And the question from our perspective is looking at a more detailed delineation of the estimate. And I have to admit, I don't know a lot about zoning permit fees other than the broad strokes. So, having it broken out a little bit will help us understand what parts will we be able to look at and which parts are really not flexible.
So in one way, Jordan, I would encourage you to kind of approach it with the team there is kind of say, okay, you've got the zoning permit fees, which we thought were the kind of most likely candidate, but you also probably have a methodology for calculating the building permit fees as well, where as we discussed in the memo, we thought there's still value to performing those services. So it might be most useful as you kind of guide the folks back at City Hall through this process to say, to target 400,000 across the entire spectrum of permits, right? We don't, obviously from a project standpoint, we really don't care how you get there, so to speak. If it's like, well, we need to make sure that we charge this much to cover time, but we can take off, whatever other fee associated is with processing it or something like that. If you can get to a $400,000 number through whatever approach is possible, then I think it solves our problem. I don't think we need to be wedded to exactly which portion of those fees we're paying or not.
Okay. But the only number that, I guess, if you have a list of the other city fees that you are like, is there a building permit fee? I'm not aware of it. That's separate from the zoning permit fee.
Yes.
Looking at all and I don't know. I can't remember if that was in your memo or not, Nathan. But having a list of all of the city costs would be useful as we're doing this exercise. And I do understand from Scott that under state statute, the major impact fee does not apply to this project. So, if that's Tom, is that something that you were already aware of?
No.
Okay. So this is what I have from Scott, is that schools are subject only to limited zoning review under state statute. So the major impact fee typically associated with large projects does not apply to the BHS redevelopment.
Okay, that's helpful. Our budget calculation for total city permit fees was between zoning and building permit and trade permits was not about $800,000 in round figures. So any of that we can save is going to be a plus.
Okay, so and then just so you'll be following up with me with more detailed delineations of all those costs, so we can look through them and say this is something that this is a flexible thing that the city may be able to cap. This is not. And just to my first point is that the fees really are designed to cover the staff overhead and city resources necessary to support projects. So there's likely that at least some fee will need to be paid.
Understood. We'll drill down and get some detail and hopefully make some progress in this.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking Nate's memo to Scott. Is it Scott or Steve?
Scott.
Scott. And that is what we had hoped you would ask of us, to create a budget for you to be able to look at in broad strokes, so it's not just a lump sum number, and where Tom derived, from that estimating of those costs. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jordan, or Tom.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Jordan, just a quick question. Do you think it's feasible to get a better sense of the overall permitting costs, hopefully prior to next Tuesday's board meeting, or given the time frame that might not be, and the
I mean, if
people are working.
you're able to circle back and send a really detailed delineation of each of the costs, probably unlikely by Tuesday. I definitely want to stay focused on this and get you an answer as soon as possible. But it's going to be ultimately a legal analysis. So I guess maybe depending on how long it takes to get the information, but I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation between the city and the schools around what is possible. And I think, this is a conversation we've had frequently with the school district, but I do think that any possible or potential agreement that we come to would need to be reviewed by the Department of Education in consideration that this would not be considered municipal support of education that violates state law. So I think it's going to be a while before we have I think it's going to take some ongoing work before we have something definitive.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it's a continuing conversation, and that's a whole lot better than the conversation being shut down. So we'll take it.
That's exactly right.
Good.
I have just one more thought on this. First, I just want to say, I think this process has been amazing to get to this point. It's I know to some degree from my own background just how hard it is to bring a project cost down like this by this amount. This is almost like a miracle to get to where we are right here, right now. And then I look at these numbers, and we're not $400,000 off if we don't round up the $3,844,000. If we just use that number, we're more like needing to get $244,000 from the city as a reduction in their fees. So they'd still get 156,000. And I mean, and I think at this point it makes better sense to talk about those numbers a little more specifically than talking about the whole 400,000.
Okay, I'll make that my top priority starting tomorrow, is getting some details on all those fees,
Thank you.
and checking my assumptions with Scott, and making sure that my calculations are more precise.
Thank you.
Other members of the BCOC, and you want to weigh in or ask questions or make comments? Don't be shy.
Hey, Tom, it's Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Hi. So, well, I want to thank everybody for the work and know that I'm in support of what we've been doing, probably because I've been part of it. But it's been a lot of meetings and looking at spreadsheets, and I want to stay excited and say, yay, we should do this. So that's me being the cheerleader.
You?
And then I think a clarifying question. Under a path to 70 million, the first line, is it supposed to be 4 million at the end? Or I'm just
No. It says the cost of work would have to be reduced to about 47 million.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So all these cuts come from the cost of work. It does have some relation to general conditions and a little bit on owner cost, but really the bulk of the calculation is done in that cost of work line.
Thanks, I had gotten confused.
Eric, you still with us?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. No, I agree with Kate. If there's a path to get what we talked about at our last meeting in terms of the things that we really want to include in this project, including the air conditioning, et cetera, if Nathan's found a path to find the funding to make that stuff happen, I'm not so focused on the 70 million as long as we can fund everything that we're talking about one way or another. It seems like that's where we're headed. So.
Okay.
I agree with that. I certainly agree with that too. I mean, I think this has been great work, and I certainly support what's presented here in terms of the way to move forward. I think it's got a real good chance to make it, or get so incredibly close that we'll make it somehow. So I'm definitely in support of this.
I agree. I think we should focus less on the getting to 70 than if we can get everything we want for what Nate's done. I think that's I'm in full support of that.
And Marty?
I just wanted to make a comment that David asked about the support of the school board. Not that I can speak for any school board member whatsoever, nor do I have any idea if they're supporting the additional revenue funds for this project. But what I can say is, from the last BCOC meeting, we presented to the school board the BCOC's recommendation to keep the AC and the additional interior treatments into the project, and the board supported the BCOC's recommendation to look for additional revenue. So that's at least one positive support that they supported that approach as well.
Right.
So we do have some board members. Again, Tom, we would love to hear from them. And then I think we should time bound it just so that we know it's 6:33 because we will have their time to be able to talk about it on April 21st. But I'm here and listening to the BCOC's responses. And at this time, if there anyone from the school board, Tom will moderate.
And that's good. That's good, Claire. I do want to hear from the school board members. I noticed we do have a member of the public who's just joined us a few minutes ago, Mr. Flanagan. Welcome. And
Tom, can we ask-
I certainly want to give him time to comment or ask questions. Yeah, Kate.
Does Jordan want to weigh in again? I mean, she gave us a lot of information, but does she want to weigh in before we go to school board?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Fisher, Mr. Carey, Kathy.
Sure, I'll go if nobody else wants to.
Yep.
My thought here is really a mindset of what I've been reading around the financial situation in the state and the ed fund. And so my concern would be to take money that could be used elsewhere in the system to increase over to fill that $4 million gap that we're talking about. So I absolutely support this project, but I don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul when we might be having some significant budget gaps over the next 2 years because of the economic impact of this. And so that's my big concern, so I can get into details about, like the Taft money, right? So, but I don't want to do that right here. You asked the temperature of the board, and I would be concerned about taking money that could be used elsewhere in the system and putting it towards a important project that's already $70 million that we got from the voters.
Okay.
I don't know whether, am I unmuted?
No, we hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know whether this is for here or at the school board meeting. I just was wondering with the Taft money, what have we been using it for? And has some of it been used, or has it all just been sitting there?
Marty and I could probably answer some of that off the top of our heads and do more research, but in short, we have used a good portion of it. I think, again, I'm going to say ballpark figures, $500,000 of the total amount that we got for the lease. And those costs were associated with essentially largely moving those programs into their new spaces, kind of fitting up their spaces, doing whatever renovations and investments we needed to do so that those programs had a kind of landing spot when it was done. So we have spent a good portion of it, but we have not spent it recently because obviously that move was a number of years ago now. So since that time, the money has been sitting there and pending, kind of dedication of those funds to a permitted use.
But those funds have to be used for those programs. Yes.
Not
thanks.
exactly. So when in the wake of the lease of the Taft building, the school board brought forward and ultimately the voters passed a ballot question citywide, which committed us to using the funds for the relocation of the On Top and Horizons programs or other infrastructure needs. So we have quite wide latitude with respect to the type, we could use it for any sort of infrastructure investment. However, we couldn't use it, for example, to, pay the business manager's salary. That would obviously not be a permitted use.
Or doing any other kind of paying teachers' salaries or anything like that.
Correct. It couldn't be used for wages or benefits or kind of any ongoing costs if we think of it in those terms of
Oh.
just kind of our regular operations.
But we
Okay.
could use it for renovation of other schools like IAA
Yes.
needs. Okay.
Absolutely.
But
Right.
but I want to be able to say we have those dollars allotted for within the capital campaign for Marty. Would you want to speak to that? So again, that robbing Peter to pay Paul, I want to the schools that are in need. And I know we might be specifically talking about the leak at IAA and, you know, things that have to wait for the capital campaign. Do you feel, Marty, with the funds that we have allocated based on the capital campaign, all school campuses, you know, have their finances, you know, their budgeted allotment, and we're waiting?
Well, just like this project, all projects are costing greater than anticipated at the time that those projects were estimated. So that there's always need for additional money, but I certainly would say that yes, we have a robust capital plan with funds available to address the needs in all the rest of the schools, and given that on top would be in this building, it seems like it would make more sense to utilize those funds that were from the sale of the Taft building, which was where the On Top program was housed, to be put towards this project versus, let's say, an upgrade at IAA, which is completely unrelated. But clearly, based on how the motion was written, we would have that ability. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and Marty, let me just go back, and you mentioned that, you know, like the funds for IAA are funded, but they're just, we know that we can pull from the capital plan, but that's a loan, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and the money that is from Taft is not a loan, so it would not be a burden to the taxpayers.
That is correct also.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good point. Thank you, Commissioner Fisher.
I'll make a comment.
Yes,
Can you
go
hear
ahead, Stephen. Yeah, we can hear you, Stephen. Thank you.
So I was really happy to see Nate's memo because I understood the cuts that were talked about and the public communication about how those features of the new building are so important to so many people. So I was very happy to see that there does seem to be a way to fund that in this new proposal. I'm personally a little disappointed in the wow factor that kind of went down in the compromising that's been going on for the last year or so, but I see the necessity of that. So I personally am fully in support of the new project and the work that the committee has done for this to go forward, and I'm hoping that my fellow board members can agree with that.
Thank you.
I have one question about the Taft money, though. Is that, I've heard people say the sale of the building, and I've heard people say the lease of the building. So is the Taft money a yearly fund that's available, or is it a one-time money?
So yeah, it's a little bit counterintuitive. It is technically a lease. It was a 99-year lease, and we received, I believe it was 1.6 million, 1.5 or 1.6. I'd have to double check for sure, but we received that money all up front. It's a one-time payment. So once that money is gone, it will not be returning in any way from museum.
Thanks. And the other question I had about the reconciliation figures that you went over at the beginning of this presentation, how solid are they? So I'm concerned that, you know, as we go through the next couple of years or so, those figures are going to skyrocket. But my hope is that those are solid figures that will be bid upon, and then the construction companies will meet the requirements of those figures to provide what we need for the building. Is that how it works?
Oh, that's a good question, Stephen. I'm glad you answered it. Or asked it. I'm going to probably answer it like a politician. We're really confident in the numbers as they relate to the information that we currently have. So it's a reminder that we're still in this schematic design phase. We still don't have a complete handle on the hazardous materials and what the EPA will make us do in regard to that. It's in the budget, but we don't know yet if that's going to hold up. we don't know yet what the effect of the shutdown will have on the economy, if it's going to drive construction costs up or down, or if it'll be neutral. So, yes, we're comfortable with the numbers for what we know now about the project and the details that we have in hand. But there are certainly opportunities for this to start going off the tracks again, and we're going to do everything we can to keep that from happening. But the path is to build more data, more information, more detail, and keep fine tuning it all the way throughout the whole process.
Thank you.
And I would,
Jordan's got her hand up.
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, you kind of just answered my question in the last part of what you said, Tom, but I'm wondering in considering the effects of COVID on construction costs, do you think that construction costs will go down? And it sounds like, I mean, the answer is that we don't really know what's going to happen. So,
personally, and professionally, I don't think they will. But that's just total speculation. I don't have a crystal ball any more than anybody else does. But
right.
there are a lot of forces in play before the pandemic that were driving construction costs up, and a lot of that was related to labor and availability of skilled labor. And a lot of that in turn is related to an aging workforce. I don't think those factors are going away when this pandemic clears and we're back to a so-called normal. So I think there's still that some people are speculating, well, there's going to be a lot of hungry contractors out there really scrambling for work, but there are also a lot of projects that are already in the pipeline that have been suspended, and there'll be a lot of owners scrambling to get their projects done. So my best guess is that we're not going to see a big savings in construction because of this. I think the best we can hope for is something neutral.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Claire.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I'm glad everyone's asked that question. I do want to reiterate, though, that Whiting Turner is a experienced national firm, and they're estimating. We've witnessed over the last 7 months is conservative. It is not in their interest to underestimate this project or this site. And with that, fighting for those contingencies and the confidence that they have in their estimating, and then being challenged is not a contentious way, but being challenged by an independent third-party estimator, which again, Vermeulen's out of Boston, are the lead, a leader in their field. So, when we speak to the costs, I mean, we were looking at competitive costs in a Vermont market that we know is competitive based on available labor and the projects that are happening throughout the state. So my point is that it's been competitive. It always is. It isn't based upon hoping to get a lower price. And so these prices, these estimates, I believe, and Marty could speak to it, and Tom, based on their work with these type of construction management companies and constructions, I look at these numbers and I don't step away from them. We had to eliminate things that we were disappointed we had to eliminate from this project to get to this number. And so again, not knowing the future ahead, but knowing that these estimates are strong based on the content that we have moved forward in supporting to make these renovations to this campus.
I want to thank you, Claire, and everyone. I want to make sure that we give time to hear from Mr. Flanagan if he wants to ask a question.
Yep. So Tom, just a heads up, that is Tom Flanagan, our new our superintendent that will start in July.
Oh yes, how you doing?
So
I know I recognize the name, but I.
No problem. Yeah, sorry I was hiding there. I'm sort of multitasking and listening in. No questions now. Just interested in learning as I start to come on board. But
Thank
hello,
you.
everybody. Good to see you all.
Thank you for joining us.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you. Great.
Now, one last question I have for board members. I'm really, first of all, I want to say thank you to the three of you, Stephen, Kathy, and Michael for joining us tonight. I think it's really helpful. I appreciate your questions and your interest. My question for you is, what, if anything, would you like to see added to or taken away from this presentation? Because we have a 6 days to tweak it before we present it to your full Board of Commissioners.
When you say presentation, do you mean this presentation here?
Yes.
Okay.
This particular slide deck.
Okay.
We already had some ideas about things we might want to add to it for the benefit of the board, but it's the basic bones of it are going to be about the same as you see tonight. But if there's anything in particular that you want to see in addition to what you saw tonight, then I'd be happy to accommodate you.
No, other than wanting to see a lot more in there than what is, no, I haven't. But that's just me. I'd love that wow factor of having a beautiful entryway and all that kind of stuff be there, but no, it's fine. The presentation is very good. Thank you.
I'd say, are you with me?
Yes.
I would just say if you can nail down any more specific information from the city, that would be helpful. Because I remember the figure was higher, as you said, it was more like 800,000. I thought it was over $1 million for the permit and procedural process. And then I heard 500,000 today. So I'd like to, it'd be nice to have maybe a better idea of what that is, even though I heard that probably won't be available on Tuesday.
Well, what we've budgeted so far, Stephen, with permits is roughly 800,000 in round figures. What we're asking to be abated as part of the gap closing measure is 400,000. So half of that 800,000 that's currently in the budget.
Yeah.
My task over the next few days is to find out how accurate that $800,000 budget was. And I'll be thrilled if I overestimated that.
Yeah, well, that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Claire, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
This is for Claire. Once this is presented to the board, is there a particular, and sorry if I missed this, is there a particular ask of them after the presentation? Is there a process of like a seal of approval, or we recommend that this be relooked at? Can you let me know what that process is?
Yes, great question. So Nathan and myself and Marty will work on a motion to move forward with this avenue of funding to meet the estimate of 374.3. No, 70. Sorry, I'm just messing up. The overage of 70 million, and then we would take that to the Board of Finance, showing board BCOC support and school board support.
Can I go back to Tom's question about
Thank you, Claire.
Tom's question about what the board would need or we're looking for? I think for me, it's more on the Nate side. So Nate, I would want to understand from the options that you put forward to fill that gap, what the implications of using those funds are. So if we didn't use the TAF money, if we use the TAF money for the renovation, what would we not be able to use it for? Or if we use there were some, what are the options to use that money if not for BHS, BTC renovation?
Smart.
Yep, I think I can provide a little more detail on that either now or kind of more comprehensively at that board meeting next week.
Okay, thank you.
Marty.
I'll just make a statement that it may be useful if Claire just puts something out that suggests that if board members want to send questions ahead of time to prepare us to have answers for Tuesday, that might also be helpful.
I like that.
Those
Yeah.
members that are not here tonight.
I will do that.
Excellent. Well, if no one has any more questions or requests or comments, I would move to close this meeting, and I want to thank everyone for participating. It's really helpful, very helpful.
Yes, see for your attendance, full attendance. That helps us a lot.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
Tom.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.